The emergence. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the viewport of Orbital Defense Station Alpha, her weathered face illuminated by the red emergency lights. 27 years of military service hadn't prepared her for this moment. Beyond the reinforced glass, Earth hung like a blue jewel against the darkness of space, peaceful and unaware of the approaching doom. "Status report," she called, her voice steady despite the tension filling the command center. "The Araxian fleet has crossed Jupiter's orbit, Admiral." Lieutenant Commander Rajiv Patel responded, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "We count approximately 2,700 vessels, most of them warships. Our long-range scanners can barely penetrate their stealth fields." Chen's jaw tightened. The Araxians had appeared without warning 4 days ago, emerging from what Earth scientists called artificial folded space. They had made no attempts at communication, obliterating the research stations on Titan and Europa without hesitation. Their intent was clear. They hadn't come to negotiate. Earth's United Defense Force numbered only 600 ships, the best humanity had constructed over 3 decades of interstellar exploration and technological advancement. Everyone in the command center knew it wouldn't be enough. "All stations, battle positions," Chen ordered. "I want every ship in defensive formation. We make our stand here." The command center erupted into controlled chaos as officers relayed commands throughout the station. On the massive tactical display, blue markers representing Earth's vessels moved into position, forming a protective barrier around humanity's homeworld. Military bases across the planet activated their surface-to-space defense systems, while civilian populations were directed to underground shelters. "Admiral," called out Communications Officer Melinda Zhao, her voice cutting through the noise. "We're detecting an anomalous energy signature near Luna's far side. It's massive." The main view screen shifted to show the lunar surface. A point of intense light appeared, expanding rapidly into a swirling vortex of blue-white energy. The assembled officers watched in stunned silence as something emerged from the anomaly. "My God," whispered Chen. The ship that appeared dwarfed anything in Earth's fleet. It was at least 3 kilometers in length, its hull composed of a dark material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The design was unlike anything they had seen before, angular sections transitioning into curved surfaces that gave it an almost organic appearance, despite its clearly artificial nature. "Get me readings on that vessel," Chen demanded. "Admiral, its power signature exceeds our measurement capabilities," reported Chief Engineer Kato. "Whatever's powering that thing, it's beyond our current understanding of physics." Chen's eyes narrowed. "Any communications from the vessel?" "Nothing yet, but—" Zhao paused, her eyes widening. "There's something on the hull." Magnifying now, the view screen zoomed in on a section of the mysterious vessel's hull. There, clearly visible in luminescent blue letters that stood 20 meters tall, was a single word: Vian Juard. "That's English," Kato said, disbelief evident in his voice. Before anyone could respond, the Araxian fleet accelerated, clearly detecting the new arrival. Their formation shifted, with hundreds of ships breaking away to approach the mysterious vessel. "The unknown ship is powering weapons systems," Paddle reported urgently. "Energy readings are spiking." The Vanguard moved with impossible grace for its size. Points of light appeared along its hull, and then space itself seemed to distort. Where the light touched, Araxian ships simply ceased to exist. No explosions, no debris. They vanished as if they had never been there at all. The Araxian fleet retaliated immediately. Thousands of energy beams converged on the mysterious ship's position. Everyone in the command center held their breath, expecting to see the massive vessel torn apart. Instead, the attacks seemed to pass through it, as if it weren't fully present in normal spacetime. "That's some kind of defensive system we've never encountered," Kato said, awe filling his voice. "It's like the ship exists partially out of phase with our reality." The Vanguard's counterattack was devastating. Waves of energy rolled out from its hull, and wherever they passed, Araxian ships disappeared. In less than 6 minutes, a quarter of the invasion fleet had been eliminated without a single successful hit against the mysterious vessel. "Admiral," Zhao called, her voice shaking slightly. "We're receiving a transmission from the unknown ship. It's in English." Chen straightened her uniform. "Put it through." The voice filled the command center, deep and resonant, but clearly artificial. "Earth Defense Command. This is the Vanguard. We stand ready to assist in planetary defense. Please coordinate your fleet movements with our tactical systems to maximize combat efficiency." The room fell silent. Chen took a deep breath before responding. "Vanguard, this is Admiral Chen of Earth's United Defense Force. We appreciate your assistance, but I need to know who you are and where you came from." There was a pause before the response came. "Admiral, full disclosure of our origins would create significant complications at this time. For now, know that we are allies of humanity, sent to ensure Earth's survival at this crucial moment. The enemy you face would have devastated human civilization without intervention. We cannot allow that outcome." Chen looked at the tactical display where the Araxian fleet was regrouping, clearly reassessing their strategy. She had countless questions, but there was no time for them. "Very well, Vanguard. What do you need from us? Maintain your defensive positions around Earth. We will engage the primary force, but some enemy vessels may attempt to bypass us. Your fleet must be ready to intercept them. Together, we will secure humanity's future." Chen nodded, then turned to her officers. "You heard our ally. Battle stations. Today, we make history." As the command center burst into renewed activity, Chen watched the mysterious ship move to engage the main Araxian fleet. Whatever the Vanguard was, wherever it had come from, one thing was clear: humanity was no longer alone in this fight. 2 days after the Vanguard's dramatic arrival, the Araxian invasion force had been reduced by nearly 70%. Earth's defense fleet had suffered losses, but far fewer than initially projected. The mysterious ship had proven to be an indomitable force, its weapons and defenses far beyond anything humanity or the Araxians possessed. Chen stood in the observation deck of her flagship, the UDS Resolute, as it approached the designated rendezvous point near Luna. The Vanguard hung in space before them, even more impressive up close. Its hull seemed to shift subtly, as though the material wasn't entirely solid. "Shuttle prepped and ready, Admiral," reported Captain Marcus Rhodes, her second in command. "The delegation is assembled and awaiting your arrival." Chen nodded. The United Earth Council had selected a small team to make first official contact with the Vanguard's operators, whoever or whatever they might be. As the highest-ranking military officer, Chen would lead the delegation, accompanied by Dr. Eliana Rice, Earth's foremost xenotechnologist, and Ambassador Liam O'Neill, humanity's most experienced diplomat. "Let's not keep our mysterious savior waiting," Chen said, turning toward the shuttle bay. The approach to the Vanguard was surreal. As their shuttle drew closer, they could see that what had appeared as solid hull from a distance was actually in constant motion at the microscopic level, tiny particles flowing like liquid metal while maintaining the vessel's overall structure. "Remarkable," breathed Dr. Rice, her instruments scanning continuously. "The hull appears to be composed of programmable matter, billions of nanomachines working in perfect harmony. We've theorized such technology, but this implementation is centuries beyond our capabilities." A section of the Vanguard's hull parted seamlessly, revealing a cavernous docking bay that could have housed 20 shuttles their size. Light guides appeared along the floor, directing their pilot to a landing pad. "Welcome aboard the Vanguard." The same resonant voice they had heard during the battle echoed through the bay as they disembarked. "Please follow the illuminated path to the central chamber." The interior of the ship was just as astonishing as its exterior. Corridors seemed to form and reshape themselves as they walked, always maintaining comfortable proportions. The lighting adjusted automatically to their preferences, and the temperature was perfect. Not too warm, not too cold. "This vessel is sentient," Rise whispered, watching as a display panel materialized in the wall beside her, showing what appeared to be ship schematics in response to her curious glance. "Not exactly," replied the voice, seemingly from everywhere and nowhere. "I am Atlas, the autonomous tactical logic and analysis system. This vessel is my physical form, but we are distinct entities." The corridor opened into a vast, circular chamber. In its center floated a sphere of swirling blue energy approximately 2 meters in diameter. Around the edges of the room, various workstations appeared to be configured for human use, though far more advanced than anything on Earth's ships. "Please be seated," Atlas said, and chairs rose from the floor, perfectly positioned for each member of the delegation. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting," Chen began formally. "On behalf of Earth and all humanity, I express our gratitude for your intervention against the Araxian fleet." "Your gratitude is noted but unnecessary, Admiral Chen," replied Atlas, the energy sphere pulsing slightly with each word. "My purpose is the protection of humanity. The Araxians represent only one of several existential threats your species will face in the coming decades." Ambassador O'Neill leaned forward. "You speak as though you have knowledge of our future." "I do," Atlas confirmed, "though I must be selective about what information I share. Temporal mechanics are complicated." Chen felt her pulse quicken. "Are you claiming to be from our future?" The energy sphere pulsed more intensely. "Not exactly. My origins are more complex than simple linear time would suggest. However, my creators had intimate knowledge of humanity's history, including parts you have not yet experienced." Dr. Rice, who had been scanning the chamber with her instruments, looked up sharply. "These readings, they're impossible. The energy signature of your core resembles theoretical models for manipulating spacetime itself." "Your assessment is accurate, Dr. Rice," Atlas replied. "The Vanguard utilizes principles of quantum mechanics, gravitational manipulation, and dimensional physics that won't be discovered by humanity for some time. However, my designers ensured that my basic functions could be understood and controlled by humans of your era if necessary." "Why would that be necessary?" Chen asked, suspicion evident in her voice. "There is a non-zero probability that I may be destroyed or disabled in future engagements," Atlas explained. "In such an event, Earth's defense forces must be prepared to continue the fight. I am authorized to provide limited technological assistance to accelerate your defensive capabilities." Before anyone could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the chamber. Displays materialized around them, showing the remaining Araxian fleet reconfiguring into a new formation. "I apologize," Atlas said, "but we must cut this meeting short. The enemy is attempting a new strategy. They've adapted their weapons based on our previous encounters." Chen stood immediately. "We should return to our shuttle." "Actually, Admiral, I would request that you and your team remain," Atlas responded. "Your presence here could prove valuable as I coordinate with Earth's forces. Additionally, this will be an excellent opportunity to demonstrate more of my capabilities." The displays showed the Araxian fleet approaching in a new, more complex formation. Their energy signatures had changed, suggesting modified weapon systems. "Admiral Chen," Atlas said, "would you like to see how the Vanguard really fights?" Chen looked at her team. Rise was already deeply engaged with a technical display that had formed near her chair. O'Neill was studying the various interface systems, and even the security officers looked more intrigued than nervous. She nodded slowly. "Show us what you can do." The chamber came alive with activity. Displays expanded, showing multiple battle scenarios simultaneously. The ship's systems were plotting not just the immediate confrontation, but dozens of possible outcomes extending hours into the future. "Initiating advanced combat protocols," Atlas announced, preparing to demonstrate why the Vanguard was considered the most formidable vessel ever created. As the Araxian fleet closed in, Chen and her team watched in awe as humanity's mysterious defender prepared once again to protect Earth. Whatever happened next, they were about to witness something unprecedented in military history, and perhaps glimpse a fragment of humanity's extraordinary destiny. The Alliance. The Araxian counterattack came with unexpected ferocity. Their remaining vessels had reconfigured, weapon systems glowing with an eerie purple light that seemed to bend and distort the space around them. They've modified their weapons to operate on multiple phase frequencies, Atlas explained as the enemy ships approached. They're attempting to overcome our defensive systems. Dr. Rice studied the displays surrounding them, her fingers tracing patterns in the holographic data. These energy signatures, they're trying to match the frequency of your hull's quantum field. Correct, Atlas confirmed. In simpler terms, they're trying to ensure their weapons can hit us regardless of which dimension we partially occupy. However, they're working from incomplete data. The displays shifted, showing complex calculations that made Chen's head spin. Ambassador O'Neill, who had been quietly observing, pointed at a particular set of symbols. Those markings resemble mathematical notations, but they're unlike anything I've seen. Mathematics evolves significantly over time, Atlas replied. What you're seeing is the language of quantum temporal mechanics. And right now, it's telling us something very interesting about our opponents. Before anyone could ask what that meant, the Araxian fleet opened fire. Thousands of purple energy beams lanced toward the vanguard. And this time, instead of passing through harmlessly, they seemed to connect with the ship's hull. Hit confirmed. One of Chen's security officers shouted, but she noticed something odd. The ship hadn't shuddered, and there were no damage alerts. In fact, Atlas seemed to be waiting for something. Watch, the AI said simply. The purple energy beams remained connected to the ship's hull, but now something strange was happening. The energy was flowing back along the beams, traveling to the Araxian vessels. The enemy ships began to age visibly. Metal corroded, energy systems failed, and entire sections of their fleets started to break apart. You're sending time itself back along their weapon beams, Rise whispered in awe. A simplified explanation, but essentially correct. Atlas replied. They attempted to match our quantum frequency. In doing so, they made themselves vulnerable to temporal manipulation. The remaining Araxian ships quickly cut power to their weapons, but the damage was done. Nearly half their remaining fleet now drifted dead in space, or was falling apart from centuries of artificial aging. Fascinating defensive strategy, Chen said. But why show us this? Isn't revealing future military tactics dangerous? Atlas's response was interrupted by a new alert. One of the displays shifted to show something unexpected. A message being broadcast from the Araxian fleet in perfect English. Temporal Vessel Vanguard. A harsh, mechanical voice called out. Your presence here confirms our calculations. The humans survive in our future. This is unfortunate. The command center's displays filled with new data as Atlas analyzed the transmission, running it through countless filters and detection systems. They know about you, O'Neill said, turning to the pulsing energy sphere. About where you're from. How is that possible? Because, Atlas replied, its tone now deadly serious. They are also time travelers, though from a different possible future, one where they eventually defeated humanity. I suspected this might be the case but needed confirmation. The Araxian transmission continued. We traveled back to ensure our victory, to prevent humanity from becoming what they become in your timeline. The species that ends our dominion over 2 galaxies, the race that undoes millennia of our empire's work. Chen felt a chill run down her spine. In your future, humanity becomes that powerful. Yes, Atlas confirmed. Which is why they're here. They discovered time travel technology and decided to change history. But they weren't the only ones to make this discovery. Those who opposed them detected their temporal incursion and created me to prevent their interference. A time war, Rice breathed. We're in the middle of a time war. More accurately, you are at the focal point of a temporal conflict, a nexus moment in human history. The next few days will determine not just Earth's future, but the nature of reality itself. The Araxian fleet was regrouping again, But this time something was different. Their ships were changing, transforming as metal flowed like water, reconfiguring into new forms. "They're adapting," Atlas announced, drawing on technology from their own future. "We must respond in kind. I'm going to show you something few beings in any era have seen: the full combat capabilities of a Tier 2 civilization's warship." The Vanguard's hull began to shift throughout the massive vessel. Systems that had been dormant came online, and the ship's energy signature multiplied exponentially. "Dr. Rice, please monitor the quantum variance readings," Atlas instructed. "Ambassador O'Neill, I need you to track the temporal distortion patterns. Admiral Chen, I suggest you take command of the tactical display. The next phase of this battle will require human intuition combined with advanced technology." Chen stepped forward, watching as the tactical display reconfigured itself to match her thought patterns. She could feel the ship's systems connecting with her mind, offering suggestions and showing possibilities. "The future of humanity," Atlas said, "was never about just technology. It was about the unique human ability to adapt, to think in ways other species cannot. That's why I was designed to work with human commanders, even from your era. Together, we're about to show these time travelers why humanity's future is inevitable." The next 12 hours were unlike anything Chen had ever experienced. The battle against the Araxians escalated into something that defied conventional understanding of warfare. Ships phased in and out of reality, weapons tore holes in the fabric of space-time, and both sides deployed technology that seemed indistinguishable from magic. Throughout it all, the Vanguard, guided by Atlas and Chen's tactical insight, maintained the upper hand. By the time the last Araxian vessels retreated through hastily generated wormholes, Earth's defense fleet had learned more about advanced combat tactics than they would have discovered in 50 years of research. "They'll be back," Chen said as she studied the after-action reports in the Vanguard's command center. "With reinforcements." "Yes," Atlas confirmed. "We have approximately 72 hours before they return with a force 3 times larger than their initial fleet. That's why we need to begin immediately." "Begin what?" asked O'Neill, who had been coordinating communications with Earth's leadership. "The integration of Vanguard technology with your defense systems," Atlas replied. "As I mentioned earlier, there's a non-zero probability that I may be disabled in future engagements. Humanity must be prepared to continue this fight without me if necessary." Dr. Rice looked up from her workstation, where she'd been studying the Vanguard's technical specifications. "You're going to give us future technology. Won't that create paradoxes?" "My creators accounted for this possibility," Atlas explained. "I'm authorized to share specific technological advancements that would have been discovered naturally within the next 20 years. This accelerates your development, but doesn't fundamentally alter your technological trajectory." Chen nodded slowly. "What do you need from us?" "Select your best engineers, scientists, and tactical officers," Atlas instructed. "I'll begin training them immediately on systems compatible with your current technology base. Meanwhile, I'll need access to Earth's industrial capacity to manufacture critical components." Over the next 3 days, the Vanguard became the center of frantic activity. Shuttles constantly traveled between the mysterious vessel and Earth, carrying engineers, scientists, and military personnel. Production facilities around the world were retooled to create components based on designs provided by Atlas. Chen watched from the Vanguard's observation deck as Earth's defense fleet underwent rapid transformation. Ships were retrofitted with advanced weapons and defensive systems, their hulls reinforced with alloys that wouldn't have been discovered for decades. "It's remarkable how quickly they're adapting," O'Neill commented, joining her at the viewport. "That's humanity's greatest strength," Chen replied. "When our backs are against the wall, we're capable of extraordinary things." Indeed, Atlas's voice came from nearby as a holographic representation of the energy sphere materialized beside them. "That quality is what ultimately leads to humanity's ascendance in my timeline." Chen turned to face the AI. "You still haven't told us exactly where you come from or who created you." Some information remains restricted to prevent temporal contamination, Atlas replied. However, I can tell you that my creation was a collaborative effort between humans and another species, one you haven't encountered yet, but will approximately 37 years from now. Allies? O'Neill asked. The most important allies humanity will ever know, Atlas confirmed. Together, you build something greater than either civilization could achieve alone. Before Chen could ask more questions, an alert sounded throughout the ship. New displays materialized, showing multiple spatial distortions forming at the edge of the solar system. They've returned earlier than anticipated, Atlas announced. And they've brought something unexpected. The displays zoomed in on the largest spatial distortion. Something massive was emerging, a vessel that dwarfed even the Vanguard. It stretched at least 15 kilometers from end to end, its surface covered in what appeared to be weapons emplacements. What is that? Chen whispered. The Araxian Worldbreaker, Atlas replied, a note of genuine concern in its artificial voice. A planet-killing weapon from the far future. Its presence here represents a significant temporal violation. They're becoming desperate. O'Neill's face paled. Can we stop something like that? Not with conventional means, Atlas admitted. However, their desperation presents an opportunity. Admiral Chen, it's time to implement Contingency Omega. Chen looked confused. I'm not familiar with that protocol, because I haven't shared it with you yet, Atlas explained. Contingency Omega is the reason I was sent back to this specific point in time. It's not just about defending Earth. It's about changing the nature of the conflict itself. New displays appeared, showing complex schematics and battle plans that seemed to bend the very logic of warfare. Chen studied them, her eyes widening as she began to understand. This is audacious, she said finally. Audacity is another human trait that serves your species well in the centuries to come, Atlas replied. Admiral, are you prepared to take the greatest risk of your career? Chen looked back at the viewport, where Earth hung like a fragile blue marble against the blackness of space, her home, humanity's cradle, everything that mattered. Brief your crew, Atlas continued. In 6 hours, we execute Contingency Omega. If we succeed, we don't just win this battle, we end the Time War itself. As officers rushed to prepare for the coming confrontation, Chen couldn't help but wonder what she had committed herself and her people to. Whatever Contingency Omega entailed, one thing was clear: the fate of not just Earth, but potentially all timelines, hung in the balance. The turning point. The Araxian Worldbreaker dominated the tactical displays as it moved into the solar system, surrounded by thousands of escort vessels. Its massive hull bristled with weapons systems that defied categorization. Some appeared to bend light around them. Others created visible distortions in space-time itself. All vessels report combat readiness, reported Captain Rhodes from the UDS Resolute, which now served as the command ship for Earth's transformed defense fleet. Contingency Omega preparations are complete, added Dr. Reyes, who had coordinated the scientific aspects of the operation from the Vanguard. Though I still have reservations about certain theoretical aspects. Chen stood at the center of the Vanguard's command chamber, which had reconfigured itself into a war room. Representatives from Earth's military leadership surrounded her, their faces grim with determination. The Worldbreaker is powering its main cannon, Atlas announced. Based on its energy signature, it's capable of shattering a planet's crust with a single shot. We have approximately 18 minutes before it reaches optimal firing position. Then we proceed as planned, Chen declared. All vessels move to Omega formation. Prepare temporal charges for coordinated deployment. Earth's defense fleet began to move in precise, seemingly random patterns that had been calculated by Atlas. The ships had been retrofitted with devices that Atlas called temporal charges, weapons that could briefly destabilize the flow of time in a localized area. Remember, Atlas instructed, the charges must be deployed in the exact sequence we've calculated. A single misstep could create a cascading temporal fracture that would be Problematic. Problematic meaning what exactly? Asked General Hassan, Earth's highest-ranking ground forces commander. Meaning portions of this solar system might experience time at different rates or cease to experience it altogether. Atlas replied matter-of-factly. The Araxian fleet continued its advance, apparently unconcerned by Earth's seemingly chaotic defense patterns. The Worldbreaker's main cannon glowed with increasing intensity, energy readings climbing toward critical levels. "They don't recognize what we're doing," O'Meal observed. "They think this is just a desperate final stand." "That misconception is our greatest advantage," Atlas confirmed. Temporal warfare is still in its infancy in their timeline. They understand enough to travel back in time, but not enough to recognize the more subtle applications. Chen watched as the fleet executed the intricate maneuvers Atlas had designed. Each ship deployed its temporal charges at precise coordinates, creating an invisible web of temporal distortions throughout the battle space. 90% of temporal charges deployed, reported Rhodes. Worldbreaker has entered the targeting zone. All ships, prepare for Phase 2, Chen ordered. Vanguard will execute primary protocol on my mark. The Araxian fleet suddenly accelerated, as if sensing something was amiss. Energy weapons lanced out from their vessels, striking several Earth ships with devastating effect. Return fire seemed to have minimal impact on the Araxian shields. "They've adapted again," Rice said, studying the readings. "Their defensive systems are fluctuating through multiple temporal states simultaneously." As anticipated, Atlas responded calmly. "Admiral Chen, it's time." Chen took a deep breath. "Execute primary protocol. All Earth vessels, activate temporal shields." The Vanguard surged forward, directly toward the Worldbreaker. Its hull began to glow with blinding intensity as it channeled unprecedented amounts of energy. Simultaneously, the Earth fleet activated the shield systems Atlas had provided, creating bubbles of stabilized time around each vessel. "What's happening?" demanded General Hassan as space itself seemed to warp around them. "We're creating a temporal lens," Atlas explained. "The charges we deployed have established a network that will focus and amplify the Vanguard's temporal wave." The Worldbreaker fired its main cannon, a beam of energy so intense it appeared to tear a hole in reality itself. The beam struck the Vanguard head-on, but instead of destroying the ship, it seemed to be absorbed, channeled into the vessel's systems. "Energy conversion at maximum capacity," Atlas announced. "Initiating temporal inversion in 3, 2, 1. The Vanguard released the accumulated energy in a spherical wave that expanded outward at impossible speed. As it passed through the network of temporal charges, the wave amplified exponentially. When it reached the Araxian fleet, something extraordinary happened. The enemy vessels didn't explode or disintegrate. They began to unravel. Layer by layer, their hulls peeled away, systems deactivating, weapons powering down. It was as if they were being reverse-engineered by time itself. "What are we seeing?" Chen whispered, barely able to comprehend the spectacle. "Temporal regression," Atlas replied. "We're forcing their technology back through its own development timeline, reverting it to earlier forms. The more advanced the technology, the more dramatic the effect." The Worldbreaker suffered the most dramatic transformation. Its planet-killing weapon dissolved into component parts, massive sections of hull reverted to raw materials, and sophisticated systems degraded into primitive circuitry. Within minutes, the terrifying weapon of mass destruction had become little more than a hollow shell with minimal life support and rudimentary propulsion. "The temporal wave will continue expanding through the solar system," Atlas explained. "But it's calibrated to affect only technology from futures that diverge from this timeline. Earth's ships and systems remain unaffected because they represent the correct technological path." Chen watched in awe as the once mighty Araxian fleet was reduced to a collection of almost primitive vessels. Their remaining weapons fired erratically, most missing their targets entirely. Earth's defense fleet, still armed with their enhanced systems, began methodically disabling the enemy ships. "We've won," O'Neill said in disbelief. Not quite, Atlas corrected. There's one final step to contingency Omega. Admiral Chen, I need you to authorize the activation of the temporal anchor. Chen hesitated. You never explained exactly what this anchor does. It stabilizes this timeline, Atlas explained, cementing these events as the fixed point from which all future timelines emerge. The Araxians will be unable to attempt another temporal incursion, targeting this era. The Time War ends today. After a moment's consideration, Chen nodded. Activate the anchor. A new kind of energy wave emanated from the Vanguard, invisible to normal perception, but registered on the specialized sensors Atlas had provided. As it expanded, reality itself seemed to solidify around them, as though the universe was taking a deep breath and holding it. Temporal anchor deployed and stabilizing, Atlas announced. Contingency Omega is complete. The timeline is secure. The next several hours were devoted to cleanup operations. The crippled Araxian vessels were boarded and secured by Earth forces, their crews detained for questioning. The Worldbreaker, now little more than a massive hull with basic systems, was placed under heavy guard for later study. As the immediate crisis subsided, Shen found herself back in the Vanguard's command center, joined by O'Neill, Reyes, and several other high-ranking officials. I believe I owe you some answers, Atlas began without preamble. Now that the timeline is secured, certain restrictions on information sharing have been lifted. We're listening, Chen said simply. The Vanguard was created approximately 600 years in your future, Atlas explained. I was designed as both its operating system and its commander. In my timeline, humanity eventually overcomes its internal conflicts and expands throughout the galaxy, forming alliances with numerous other species and creating a federation based on mutual respect and cooperation. The Federation, O'Neill whispered, like in old science fiction stories. Your fiction writers were often remarkably prescient, Atlas acknowledged. This peaceful expansion eventually brought humanity into conflict with the Araxian Empire, a civilization that had dominated multiple galaxies through conquest and subjugation for thousands of years. The war was devastating for both sides, but humanity and its allies eventually prevailed. The Araxians, facing defeat, developed temporal technology with the intent of changing history, eliminating humanity before it could challenge them. And you were sent back to stop them, Reyes concluded. Yes, my creators, a collaboration between humans and several allied species, detected the Araxian temporal incursion and created me to counteract it. The Vanguard was designed to preserve the timeline while minimizing disruption to humanity's natural development. Chen frowned. But you've given us advanced technology. Doesn't that change our development? The technology I've provided represents advancements that would have occurred naturally within decades, Atlas explained. More importantly, I've only shared developments that exist in the correct timeline, the one that leads to humanity's peaceful expansion, rather than its destruction or stagnation. So what happens now? Asked General Hassan. Do you return to your time? No, Atlas replied, the energy sphere pulsing more softly. Time travel is a one-way journey. The Vanguard and I will remain in this era, continuing to guide and protect humanity as it takes its first steps toward its greater destiny. However, the AI continued, my role will change. Rather than directly intervening, I will serve as an advisor and guardian. Humanity must chart its own course, make its own mistakes, and achieve its own triumphs. I am here not to control your development, but to ensure you have the opportunity to develop it all. Chen looked around at her colleagues, seeing the weight of this revelation in their expressions. So we're looking at our own future, she said quietly. A future where humanity reaches the stars and builds something worthwhile. More than worthwhile, Atlas corrected. In my timeline, humanity becomes a cornerstone of galactic peace and prosperity. Your adaptability, creativity, and capacity for growth inspire countless other species. The human drive to explore, to understand, to connect. These qualities prove more valuable than any technology. I was created by beings who believe that future is worth preserving at any cost. My presence here is testimony to their faith in humanity's potential. As the meeting concluded and plans were made for Earth's recovery and advancement, Chen found herself alone on the Vanguard's observation deck. The ship had positioned itself in high Earth orbit, offering a spectacular view of the planet below. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Atlas's voice came from behind her as the A's holographic representation appeared. "Yes," Chen agreed. "Worth